Hi, this is Usha. Welcome to Rathod Science classes. Today in this lecture, we are going to see current affairs of 29th September 2021. In this lecture, we are going to discuss 8 topics which are very much relevant to UPSC. So, let us see the topics we are going to discuss in a brief, okay? So first topic is about by-polls to Lok Sabha and Assembly seats on October 30, and they are going to count votes by November 2nd. So here you need to understand what is this by-poll. So many students they don't know about what is this by-polls. So for especially for beginners, so we are going to discuss what is this by-polls and some facts regarding Election Commission of India. So this will be important from our polity which comes under GS paper 2. And next topic it is about lockdown slowed green energy push. So actually we are having an ambitious goal to achieve green renewable energy, but due to this COVID-19 imposed lockdowns that led to slowdown of installation process. So that is a thing which mainly said in this report. And this will be important from environment and ecology which comes under GS paper 3. And next topic is about 20 RTI right to information activists killed in Bihar in past 11 years. So here we need to know about what is this RTI. RTI Act of 2005. This will be important from our polity point of view, which mainly comes under our GS paper 2. And this RTI Act is also important from our ethics point of view also. And this one is Gadkari reviews Jojila tunnel work. So actually, so you need to know some important passes in our northern India. So there are many passes like Jojila Pass. So you have to arrange them in from north to south and as well as south to north and from east to west and as well as west to east. So here we are going to discuss about this tunnel that will be important from our geography and even economy. So in economy we are having one topic like infrastructure. So under this infrastructure, you can read this topic. And next topic it is about schools can reopen in phases according to ICMR. ICMR came up with one important study and it said that yes, we can go for reopening of schools in a phased manner. So that will be important from education. And next one it is about United Nations World Happiness Report. So recently 2021 report is released and this article, which is a unique article which is mainly relating happiness with the law making process in India and as well as some laws. So this will be important from our governance which comes in the GS paper 2, and I found this article, it is a very interesting. And next one is civil servants and social media. Actually this topic it is very important from our ethics. So whether civil servants they need to use social media or they need to restrict the use of social media. So that is the thing we are going to discuss. And next topic is about pendency of cases. So this article mainly gave 3 important measures that need to be taken to reduce the pendency of cases. So apart from this, there were some articles regarding elections in somewhere, okay, that appeared in page number 6, actually in Germany. And I think that is not much important from UPSC point of view, but you have to see which are the countries sharing boundary with that country. And there is article regarding insurgency. In yesterday's topic we studied like our Minister of Home Affairs said that there is decreasing of this insurgency that is seen reduced to 46 districts. So here regarding that one article came that I think I read that, but I didn't found nothing much. Already we discussed regarding that topic in detail in our studies lecture. Okay, so these are some important topics now we are going to discuss. So now let us try to see first article. Title says by polls to Lok Sabha, Assembly seats on October 30 and they are going for counting on November 2nd. So here we need to understand what's the role of ECI, Election Commission of India, and we need to understand and we need to remember, so for which ECI going to conduct elections. So now this topic it is very important from our polity point of view which comes under GS paper 2. So now let us try to see why it is in news. So Election Commission of India ECI announced that by elections especially in Dadra Nagar Haveli and Khandwa, Mandi Lok Sabha. So in this Lok Sabha they are going to have by elections and also by-elections in 30 assembly constituencies across the countries. And across the country they are going to hold this by-elections for 30 assembly constituencies, and they are going to conduct on October 30, and the votes will be counted on November 2nd. So if you're talking about details, it mainly says that Commission reviewed the situation which is related to pandemic, floods, and as well as festival season. So now due to the cyclone Gulab, there is impact that is seen in almost many states like Odisha, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So now here ECI, which mainly reviewed pandemic situation and even floods and as well as festival, and finally they took this decision to conduct by-elections on October 30. So now let us try to understand what is the meaning of by-elections. By-elections nothing but in any constituency if there is any vacancy, so that vacancy mainly filled by this by-elections. Okay, and if you're talking about Election Commission of India, so as you all know, it is a constitutional authority. It is a constitutional body. So what is the mandate of this constitutional body? It is mainly responsible for administering union and as well as state election process. So it will conduct union elections and even state election process, and this constitutional body which mainly administers elections especially to Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and state legislative assemblies and offices of especially president and vice president. So here this thing that you need to remember compulsorily, because this will be important from your prelims point of view. So for municipalities and panchayat, the Election Commission of India, okay, Election Commission of India which is not going to conduct that. So for that we are having which body will conduct elections for municipalities and panchayat? Let me know in comment box. Okay, so our Election Commission of India which mainly administer elections to Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, state legislative assemblies and even offices of president and as well as vice president. So this Election Commission of India, it is a constitutional body, but under which part it will comes under? It mainly comes under part 15 of our Indian Constitution. So part 15 of our Indian Constitution which mainly deals with elections, and also it establishes a commission, that is Election Commission of India, for conducting or administering elections. So Election Commission mainly established accordance with our Constitution on 25th January 1950. So here one more thing you need to remember. So what is that thing? That is articles. So articles, from which article to which article which mainly deals with Election Commission of India. So why I am stressing on articles and part? Because if you want to write any answer regarding polity, in introduction try to start your answer with this constitutional provisions. For example, Election Commission of India mainly it is seen in the part 15 of our Indian Constitution, so which mainly deals with the elections at union level and as well as state level. So it is a body which conduct elections for Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, state legislative assembly and offices of president and as well as vice president. And if you see articles, from article 324 to article 329, article 324 to article 329 which mainly deals with the powers, functions, tenure, eligibility, etc. of this Election Commission of India. So these are some important things that you need to remember. And one homework for you people, please try to open your Lakshmikant and see what are the functions and what are the mandate, what is the eligibility, what is the tenure, etc. regarding this Election Commission of India. Don't forget about this. And now let us move on to the next topic. It is about lockdowns slowed green energy push. So this is about IEEFA report. So according to IEEFA report, which mainly says that due to COVID-19 pandemic imposed lockdowns that led to slowing the process of installation of this renewable energy technology. So this is about this report. And how can we use this article? So here this article gives some important data regarding our renewable energy targets. So you can collect this data and you can write in a separate book. So I will highly recommend you people to maintain a separate data book. So every day there will be some reports which will be coming up. So one tip I want to give you here is Okay, take a separate data book and leave at least 2 or 3 pages for one topic. For example, let us talk about renewable energy. So leave 3 pages and try to add the data which is coming up in newspaper daily, and 1 paper for education reports. Okay, 1 paper for happiness, 1 paper for any index, innovation index, like that. Every day any one data or any one report will be coming. So please try to maintain a data book. So why I am saying to maintain this data book? Because after once prelims is done, you are having just 3 months in your hand. So in this 3 months of time, you need to do your GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4, your optional, right? So you will be having a very less time to search data at that time. So if you search data at that time also, it is not sustainable. Actually, you will not go for complete searching of that data. So because of this, so whenever you are starting your preparation, at least 1 year try to maintain a data book and try to revise that frequently, such that you can remember the data, and that data you can use directly in your essays and as well as in your answers. So if you want to give any statement, should not be like a general statement. You have to give data to support your statement or support your argument. So in this way you can impress the examiner and you can get good marks. So this is the one tip from my side. So if you like it, you can follow it. Okay, it is not mandatory, like so madam said that we have to maintain that. If you don't like that, then it is your wish, but it is my suggestion. With my experience, I am sharing this tip with you. So now let's come back and let us see this article. So here, because of this lockdowns, it mainly slowed down our green energy push. So this article will be important from environment and ecology. So if you see context, it mainly says that lockdowns slowed renewable energy installations in country, and pace of such installation is lagging India's 2022 target. So here IEEF, that is Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Energy, which is a research think tank, it gave a report. It mainly says that due to COVID-19 imposed lockdowns, so it is mainly lagging our 2022 India's target of installation of renewable energy sources. So first and the foremost data I can say here is, so our target it is to install 175 gigawatts of green energy by 2022. So by 2022 we need to install at least 175 gigawatts of renewable energy. And next one is 450 gigawatts by 2030. By 2030 we need to increase this 175 gigawatts to 450 gigawatts. But what happened? If you see the data from the Central Electricity Authority, which mainly says that they have installed 100 gigawatts of solar energy capacity. So they are going to install 100 gigawatts of solar energy capacity by 2023, and 40 gigawatts mainly include solar, and 60 gigawatts from ground mountain utility scale. So here target from the Central Electricity Authority here is they are going to install 100 gigawatts of this solar energy capacity, and out of this 140 gigawatts they are mainly from roof solar top, and 60 from ground mounted utility scale. And if you see, country has managed to install 43 gigawatts till July 31st 2021, and we are having a less time. Still we need to go for 175. That means about approximately 130 gigawatts is left. So clearly, as economic growth revives, electricity demands also grows, and average prices that exchange also increases. So as you know, nowadays we are mainly moving towards technology. So earlier we do not have proper electricity supply. Earlier we do not have electric appliances, for example rice cooker, washing machines, dishwashers, AC, like that. But now in each and every house we are having it mobile phones for sure in this COVID-19 pandemic, and each of them they are working from home. They are having laptops, systems, etc. And we are having good light sources. For example, we are having many lights in our house, we are having POPs, etc., and we are installing further more lights just for decoration purpose. And even in every house we are having washing machines, dishwashers, micro ovens, fridge, etc., right? So because of this, what happened, whenever economic growth is also happening, that will also leads to increase in the demand for electricity. So on another side, we can also see there is increase in the demand for electricity as well. So whenever there is increase in the demand, the average prices will also be increased and exchange also increases. And if we are moving towards renewable energy, particularly wind energy, hydropower energy, it can contribute to lower energy prices. So for this also we need to move towards this renewable energy. And if you're talking about flexible solutions which are mainly suggested in this article, it mainly says that we need flexible and dynamic generation solutions. For example, we need to improve our technology regarding battery storage and as well as pumped hydro storage, and we need to go for peaking gas fired capacity and as well as even flexible operation, etc. So these are the some important things that we can focus. And here government need to also focus on deployment of sources that will helps to meet the peak demand, and also government need to balance the grid at lower cost. So even though demand for electricity is increasing, government need to adopt the technology and such that it can provide electricity at a lower cost and even it can meet the demand of increasing demand of this electricity. So this is the gist of this topic. And now let us move on to next topic. Title says 20 RTI activists killed in Bihar in past 11 years. So actually I want to say one thing, and let us have our exercise now. So here this title says that about 20 RTI activists killed in Bihar. Actually some famous persons like Gauri Lankesh, also one of RTI activist killed, right? So not only in Bihar but throughout the India. Throughout the India, there are many RTI activists they are killing. And not only just RTI activists who are journalists, even journalists who are mainly talking about or showing some reports regarding against the government in that states. So regarding the journalists also there is increase in the number of attacks, and even they are booked in number of cases and they are not getting even bail. So the thing which is happening in the state of Telangana now. So one question I want to pose here is whether it is a right or not. So what is your opinion, and give me some suggestions to come out of this challenge. So one thing is whether it is a wrong to ask about information regarding the government functioning. Is it wrong? So what is your opinion, and let me know in comment box. So it is the first exercise. So now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. So if you see context, it mainly says that Bihar has proved to be hostile terrain for right to information activists. So for right to information activists, so Bihar has proved to be hostile terrain. About 20 RTI activists have been killed since 2010. It is 2010 onwards. There are about 20 activists they were killed in Bihar, and since 2018, that is from last 3 years, about 6 activists they were killed. If you see some details, it mainly says that Bihar has always been unfriendly for activists, RTI activists. The RTI stands for Right to Information. Right to Information activists, with as many as 20 of Right to Information activists, they have been killed in different districts for raising their voice against corruption in government system. Mainly they are raising voice against corruption against the government system, and they are losing their life. So earlier the government officials they used to reply to these RTI applications on time, but what happened as time is passing on, but nowadays the things are changed a lot, and these things they have been changed for worse, and officials they do not take RTI applications seriously, and sometimes it takes months and sometimes it takes year to get reply as well. So this is a thing that is mainly changing over the time. So now let us try to focus on what is this right to information. So it is important from our UPSC prelims point of view, and even from ethics you need to know about this RTI, and especially beginners they need to focus on this RTI well. So RTI, it is an act of parliament. Okay, RTI is Right to Information Act of 2005. It is an act of parliament. So this act mainly sets some rules and as well as procedures regarding the citizen rights to information. So citizens citizens have the right to information. Why citizens have the right to get information from the government? So if you see, citizens, they are paying taxes. Citizens, they are paying taxes to government, so government is utilizing that taxes to come up with several measures and as well as some schemes for the development of the citizens. So now it is a right of the citizens to know how much amount of money which is mainly spent. So what are the outcomes of that? So whenever there is a citizens have empowered with the right to information, then that will lead to accountability and transparency in the governance system. So this is the thing that you need to remember. So RTI, it is an act of the parliament which mainly sets out rules and procedures regarding the citizens' right to information. So it mainly replaced former Freedom of Information Act. So you have to remember. So earlier, before this Right to Information Act, we have Freedom of Information Act of 2002. So this act mainly replaced by this Right to Information Act. So if you're talking about this act, under this RTI Act, so what are the important provisions? So under this act, any citizen of India may request information from public authority. Okay, so from public authority, here citizens, they can ask the question and they can get information regarding this public authority here, and the reply should be given within 30 days. In exercise of the matter which is involving petitioner's life and liberty, the information has to be provided within 48 hours. So if there is urgent need of information which is important for the petitioner life and even liberty, so that information should be given within 48 hours. And Act also requires public authority to computerize their records for wide dissemination and to proactively publish certain categories of information, so that citizens need a minimum recourse to request for information formally. So one important thing I want to say here is, under this Right to Information Act, there are some exceptions. So let me know those exceptions in comment box. Don't forget about this. So this is your second homework. And next one is about Gadkari reviews Zojila tunnel work. So if you see this image, it is a tunnel actually. Okay, it is a tunnel. And now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. So this will be important from your prelims point of view especially. So road works totally about rupees 1.5 lakh crore. They are being undertaken in Union Territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. So here our Minister of Road, Transport and Highways mainly reviewing this progress of this Zojila tunnel work. So because of this is in news. And if you see some details, it mainly says that the Zojila tunnel likely to be ready by September 2026. So by September 2026, so this tunnel work will be completed. And if you're talking about some specifications regarding this tunnel, it is 13.5. It is 13.5 kilometers tunnel, and it will be the Asia's longest bi-directional tunnel. And this tunnel allow all-weather connectivity, that is between Ladakh and Srinagar. So actually connectivity between Ladakh and Srinagar, that will be disrupted during the winter season because of snowfall and as well as ice, etc. But when we are having this type of tunnel, that will be provide all weather connectivity, that is between Ladakh and Srinagar. So this will be very important for our armed forces. Okay, and next one is, it is mainly located above 1158 feet above sea level. So this is one important thing that you need to remember. And it takes about 3.5 hours to travel between Srinagar and Ladakh. And to complete this construction work, and here our minister said that they need to complete this construction work by 2023 before the general elections 2024. So if you're talking about this Z-More tunnel, so actually the shape here is Z itself. So like this the shape will be there. You can see, you can watch the video regarding this Z-More tunnel. So what is the shape and what are the specifications? Yesterday I saw in some news channel regarding this tunnel actually. So it was very nice. So here the Z-More tunnel being developed at Sonmarg, and it will mainly provide all-weather connectivity with Srinagar. So it will provide all-weather connectivity with Srinagar, allowing it to remain open to tourists all year around. So this will be very important for all-weather connectivity. So now let's try to see some facts regarding this Z-More tunnel. So this Z-More tunnel, which mainly provides all-weather road connectivity, especially to Sonmarg tourist spot in Jammu and Kashmir. So this will be helpful for armed forces and even for tourist people. And this project mainly includes construction, operation and maintenance of tunnel with approaches, that is NH1 National Highway 1 at Srinagar Sonmarg Gundri Road from 61 kilometers. Okay, so this is about this topic. And don't forget your homework. Please try to see where are the passes are present, and you have to arrange them in north to south and as well as south to north, east to west and west to east. And let us see the next topic. It is about schools. Schools can reopen in phases according to ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research. So it is talking about the schools reopening. So why we need to go for reopening of schools actually? So now let us try to analyze some important things. So due to this COVID-19 imposed lockdown since March 2020 onwards, schools has been shut down. Not only schools, colleges, universities, etc. and most of the schools, colleges, they shifted towards online classes, online teaching. But there are some disadvantaged people who are mainly located in some remote areas, or tribal people or poor people who cannot afford these digital technologies. They are left out of this online classes. So in this way we can see education is also inequity in education services that we can evident. And we studied a number of articles regarding education, especially in northeastern states. They are going up to hill and as well as downhill, mainly in search of mobile network. And there are many problems which are mainly faced by children regarding sharing of their mobile gadgets. In home, if there is only one mobile phone and if there are having 2 or 3 children, then they used to fight for mobile phones for their class, right? So these are some important problems that we saw. And due to this COVID-19 pandemic, due to this digital divide, that led to learning loss in children as well. So even my kids, they even forget ABCD as well. And if now they are going to school and they are learning ABCD 1 2 3 now in their classes. So now mainly to overcome this learning loss, and as well as actually we know that today's children are tomorrow's citizens. So to become a good citizens, education is one important thing. So I personally believe one quote: one child, one teacher, one pen and one book can change the whole world. So this is the quote which is given by Yusuf Malala. So I like this quote most, and I strongly believe that education can change anything in the world. So let me know your opinion regarding education in comment box. And now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail, and now let us try to see the context. If you see context, it mainly says that evidence suggests that the children who are aged 12 and above, so children who are mainly aged 12 and above, they are higher risk of COVID-19 infection than when we are compared to children who are below 12 years of age. So children who are more than 12 years of age, we need to go for prioritized vaccine. That means we need to prioritize the children who are above 12 years. That means I can say like 7 to 10th classes, for example. Let us take from 7 to 10th classes. Children will be more than 12 years of age generally. So these students, they should be prioritized and vaccination should be given to these children, because children who are obviously less than 12 years of age, they are not much vulnerable to this COVID-19 infection. But these children who are more than 12 years of age, they are vulnerable to this COVID-19 as like of adults. So this is the thing which mainly said by our experts from ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research. And if you see some details, it mainly says that they say schools should be reopened in a phased manner. So they said that schools should be reopened in a phased manner, and beginning with primary schools and allowed them to function safely with appropriate implementation of multi-layered mitigation measures where children's participation is essential. So first we need to go for opening of primary schools, because these children are not much vulnerable to this COVID-19 infections. And later on in the phased manner, we need to go for opening of the schools. So recently ICMR came up with a report, and the title of this report is Reopening of Schools During COVID-19 Pandemic, a Persistent Dilemma. So this report mainly published by ICMR in Indian Journal Medical Research, which mainly stated that children who are aged between 1 and 17, they are having similar susceptibility to mild form of this SARS coronavirus 2 infections like adults. So the fourth round of even National Serological Survey for COVID-19. So what is a serological survey? We discussed about this, but it has been long ago. So what is this serum? So if you see in blood, we are having blood components and as well as water. So what happens, blood components mainly includes RBC, WBC and as well as platelets, etc. And we are having water, right? So here, if you're talking about liquid which is present in our blood, you will come across two important terms. First one is serum, second one is plasma. So let me know what is the difference between serum and plasma. Already we discussed number of times, I think more than 20 or 30 times we discussed about difference between serum and plasma from last year. So let me know in comment box what is the difference between serum and plasma. So here what happened, we are collecting the blood samples from so and so area randomly we are collecting blood samples. So in that blood samples we are mainly testing for presence of antibodies, especially IgG antibodies. So why IgG antibodies? So IgG antibodies will be produced in our body after once we get infection with this COVID-19. So in this National Sero Survey of COVID-19, we are mainly testing for presence of this antibodies, that is IgG antibodies. So if IgG antibodies are present in so and so person, means he already got infection with this COVID-19. So in this National Serological Survey, that is the fourth round of this survey in June 2021. So this survey revealed that more than 50% of children who are aged between 16 to 17 years, they got seropositive. That means in their body we identified this IgG antibodies. So here this mainly indicated that considerable proportion of them had been infected with this SARS coronavirus 2. They already got this SARS coronavirus infection. So if you see highlights of this report, it mainly says that ICMR stressed that if we want to go for opening or reopening of schools, means we need to ensure there is a proper adequate ventilation is present. So we should not make children to sit in a compact closed room. We should to go for taking classes in an open space, or we need to ensure there is a proper ventilation is present, such that it will helpful mainly to prevent the spread of COVID-19 among the children. And next one is school should also ensure that indoor spaces are well ventilated. Wherever possible, they limit the time spent by students in closed settings. So if the children who are spending mainly in the closed settings, so we need to remove or we need to reduce that time, and we need to increase the time that need to be spent by the children in open spaces as much as possible. And this one is whatever the air conditions we are using in our classes. For example, there are many schools, I don't know whether I can tell the names or not, but I will not reveal the names. But there are some schools, they will set up AC. So there will be AC campuses also for intermediate, for even 10th class, 8th class, 7th class, and they will take some lakhs of fees actually. So here using of air conditioners, it should be avoided, because whenever we are using air conditioner means, so the classroom should be closed. So whenever the classroom is closed and whenever we are using ACs or air conditioners, so that will mainly increases the risk of transmission of this COVID-19. So air conditions should be avoided, and we need to install exhaust fans. Exhaust fans should be installed in the classroom to curtail the spread of this coronavirus, and it's one of the suggested measure by ICMR. And next one is we must also to be acknowledged that testing strategies for this SARS coronavirus to infection in schools should act as an adjunct and not substitute to other organization and behavior interventions. So we should not acknowledge testing. So whenever any children who is suffering from any signs and symptoms of this COVID-19, we need to go for testing. And next one is actually earlier there are some recommendations, like before entering into school, at the gate itself, one person need to check the temperature of children before allowing the children into class, into school actually. So these are the earlier interventions or earlier recommendations which are given. But here routine temperature or symptom checking in schools should be avoided due to limited evidence of their utility. So if there is increase in temperature in the body of children, means it might be because of some other infections, but not only due to this COVID-19. So there are some limited evidences regarding this routine temperature check, so we can avoid that. And here, instead of this routine temperature checkups, it also recommended that schools should have access to on-site testing facilities per existing country specific guidelines. So as per the country specific guidelines, we need to go for setting up of on-site testing facilities. So these are some important recommendations. And now let us move on to some important facts regarding ICMR. ICMR stands for Indian Council of Medical Research. ICMR stands for Indian Council for Medical Research. So what is this ICMR? So ICMR, it is an apex body in India. So it is mainly mandated for formulation, coordination, promotion of biomedical research. So for formulation, for coordination and for promotion of biomedical research, we have this apex body in our country. So what is the mandate of this ICMR? So mandate here, it mainly focuses on conducting, coordinating and implementing medical research. So this coordination, conducting and implementing of medical research, that will finally benefit society at large. It will be helpful mainly in translating medical innovations into products, processes, and as well as it will be helpful in introducing them to public health system such that it will be having an effect for larger public interest. And if you're talking about this ICMR, it will be funded by our Government of India. So Government of India will be funding this ICMR, that is through Department of Health Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So these are some important facts. And now let us move on to next topic. It is about bureaucracy's digital challenge. So it is talking about biggest challenge now Indian bureaucracy, that is civil servants, are facing, whether to use the social media or not. So this article is also having some ethical touch. So this article will be important especially regarding GS paper 4. So before seeing this article, I want to ask you a question. So you are going to become bureaucrats in your future, right? So some people, they will use social media, and some students, they will avoid the social media, and some think that so using social media is waste of time, right? So let me know your opinion whether after you become bureaucrats, whether you are going to use social media or not. Yes, in this preparation time, many people say that yes, using of the social media, it is wasting of their time. Yes, of course. I argue with this statement, because whenever you are using some social media sites, means it will be like diverting. It will lead to diversion of you from your preparation. Sometimes it will also leads to wasting of time, because you will be in online for some hours. So because of this avoiding of the social media in this preparations time, it is a one of suggestible thing. But after once you become bureaucrat, let me know whether you are going to give your updates on social media or not. So let me know your opinion. And now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. So if you see central theme, it mainly says that if civil servants doesn't use social media appropriately, their role as independent advisor stands threatened. So whatever the social media that is mainly used by the civil servants, so they should be used in an appropriate way. If they are misusing the social media, means the values that need to be present in this civil servants, like anonymity, that will be threatened. So this is the thing which mainly said. So now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. If you see introduction part. So now here Indian bureaucracy mainly facing one big challenge. So what is the challenge which mainly faced by Indian bureaucracy? It is shifting from desk to digital. From paperwork, we are mainly moving towards digital thing. So from traditional work, we are mainly using some digital instruments and digital technology, that I can say. So there is shift which is not limited to transition towards e-office and e-governance, but it also includes even organizational and bureaucratic response to digital spaces, especially we are talking about use of social media now. So now one important question that is before us is to use or to not to use this social media. So for this, I will be having arguments in favor and as well as against this use of social media. So first one is, while there are many people including former civil servants who are in favor of civil servants using social media in their official capacity, and other they argue that we need to maintain anonymity. So there are many civil servants, former civil servants says that yes, we can use this, but some people say that we need to maintain anonymity. So if you're talking about especially Indian bureaucracy, so if you're defining the feature of Indian democracy which mainly gets compromised in the process of using this social media. So if you're talking about at organizational level, at an organizational form, bureaucracy is incompatible with social media. So because if you're talking about especially bureaucracy, we are having several hierarchy. We need to maintain formal relationship and even we need to follow standard procedure. So here social media is defined by openness, transparency and flexibility here. But though here social media is providing some opportunities, so we need to follow hierarchy, we need to have some formal agreements and as well as we need to follow standard operating procedures. So now let us try to talk about what is the significance of this social media. So if you see each and every civil servant, not only each and every civil servant, for each and every person who is having mobile in their phone, that is smartphone in their hands, they have access to this social media. So here this article mainly says that it is true that many civil servants, they have become accessible to common people and as well as public service delivery issues have been resolved mainly through use of social media. So whenever we are using this social media, so many people they resolve their issues. So I want to say one important thing regarding one home minister, okay, home minister of India itself. So in the Twitter page of that home minister, one person post regarding what is the problem they are faced regarding passport. So as soon as that message read by a home minister, and within some hours the issue regarding that passport has been resolved. So in the same way here, yes, we can use the social media whenever we are contacting our civil servants and as well as authorities by using the social media. Yes, absolutely there will be some help and there will be resolving of issues that can be seen here. So it is the first important advantage of social media. And this one is, social media has also created a positive outlook towards institution along perceived as opaque and as well as inaccessible. And what is another role? It also improves awareness among the people, not only people, but also regarding the government policies and programs regarding the people. And as far as it also provides even opportunity for the bureaucrats to shape public disclosure, and it will provide a platform mainly to engage with the public while being politically neutral. So if you are being politically neutral also, this social media will provide a platform mainly to engage with the public, with the people. So what are the concerns? So we need to maintain anonymity. Actually, anonymity, it is one of the hallmark of Westminster bureaucracies. So India is also one of the Westminster bureaucracy. So we need to maintain anonymity. And the next one is, here values are becoming more dominant than facts in public policy making. So what happened in this social media? So there is one problem we are facing is circulation of misinformation. So it is one important thing that we need to tackle. So even though here we are having some concerns, but this social media has been using of this social media has been gradually increasing in especially this Westminster based countries as well. For example, during Brexit debate, that is Britain exit from European Union. So in this Brexit debate, many civil servants, they shaped this public debate mainly by using the social media as a platform here. So even though they are politically neutral, they use the social media platforms mainly to conduct some debates regarding this Brexit. So if we're talking about accessibility and accountability in India, the role of social media in bureaucracy has taken a different direction in India. So social media, it is getting mainly used by civil servants for self promotion. So now here many civil servants, they are using the social media as a platform, not to resolve the issues of people, but they are mainly using for self promotion. And even social media have improved accessibility and accountability. But one important thing that we need to remember regarding civil servants is, so they are taking advantage of this social media, and they are sharing the information they want and respond to those they want. So these are some important issues. And if you see conclusion, finally author mainly says that bureaucrats, they should use social media especially for improving of public policies, not for their self promotion. So if they don't use social media appropriately, so for which thing we need to use social media? So that thing they need to understand. They should not use for their personal purpose or for self promotion, but they need to use social media mainly to resolve the issues of people. Okay, so this is the thing which mainly said in this topic. And now let's move on to next article. Title says in pursuit of happiness. So this article mainly talking about United Nations World Happiness Report, and I like this article the most personally. So this article is very important even from your GS paper to point of view, and the data which is given here in this article that you can use directly. So in this article there are 2 or 3 important data points, right? And if you see central theme, it mainly says that the great degree of unhappiness in Indian society has a lot to do with the way the law and institutions operate. So the way law and the way institutions which are operating in India, so based on that we can determine happiness in Indian society. So in Indian society, there are many problems we are facing. For example, let us take the 3 farm bills which are come up by central government. So regarding that, farmers are doing protest. Means whatever the laws which are brought by the government, so that is leading to some unhappy. The people are unhappy, right? People are not happy with that. So in this way, here laws and institutions of government, they are very much responsible for the happiness of people who are residing in that country. So this is the whole thing. So now let us try to see introduction. So until the beginning of publication of United Nations World Happiness Report, so we came up with releasing of this or publication of this United Nations World Happiness Report that started in year 2012. So from 2012 onwards, this report which is mainly releasing. So till that means before this 2012, happiness was not considered as an objective of governance. Only after publishing of this report, now we are thinking that here happiness is also one important part of our governance. But it has now emerged as a new measure of quality of governance. So now if you are measuring the happiness, how much happy the people are, so based on that we can also measure the quality of governance that is coming up in the country. So here this report mainly says that yes, there is connection between the law, governance and happiness. So now let us try to see one important data which is given. So this is because the report mainly shown that the countries with higher GDP and higher per capita income, they are not necessarily the happiness. So happiness which is not based on country's GDP or higher per capita income of that country, but it is mainly based on law and as well as institutions, how they are working. They are working according to the satisfaction of people or not. So this is the thing which we can understand now. So if you're talking about recent report, the United Nations World Happiness Report of 2021. So India's rankings out of 149 countries, it is 113. That means we occupied last 11th place. Right? So now you can understand how much people are happy in India. Right? So this happiness also measured taken into considerations like effect of COVID-19 on people and their evacuation on performance of governance system. It also included even the people happiness based on some effects of this COVID-19 as well. And this report shows that COVID-19 induced social distancing which have some severely impacted on happiness as sharing and even community life, whereas hugely affected during pandemic. So if you go back to March 2020, at that time it suddenly abruptly government imposed nationwide lockdown. So at that time, children, they firstly enjoyed staying in home. But after some days, like 10 days or 15 days, whenever they are restricted in home itself, so they started shouting like, I want Pani Puri, I need to go outside. I want to go out to play with my friends. So even the children, they are facing very, very unhappy because of these lockdowns. And here, due to this COVID-19, so here the many people rights and as well as participation, dignity, social justice are crucial even for determination of happiness in society. And one more thing I want to add here is in India. In India, we will give importance for social gatherings actually. So we will prepare festivals, especially Ganesh Chaturthi and as well as some Shivaji festival. So even we are having importance of this social gatherings even in our modern history time as well, right? So here whenever we are having mainly the functions in India, mainly we will do or we will conduct some functions, especially social gatherings, mainly to have some exchange of views and ideas, etc. But due to this COVID-19 pandemic, we restricted our social gatherings so that the people mainly felt unhappy with this. And if you see, if you are talking about determination of happiness in society, so here it will be determined mainly based on guarantee of rights, participation, dignity and social justice. So these are some crucial factors on which we are mainly determining this happiness. So the law, it is mainly capable of creating many positive obligations. For example, collective conscience, care and as well as cooperation. So these are some important things which mainly said here. So actually whenever the law which is made by the government, final aim of that law, it should be to bring happiness among the people. So as you all know, because of this report which mainly giving a least ranking for India, we can say the greater level of unhappiness that is seen in our Indian society. So now let us try to see one more report, that is according to World Justice Report. So according to this World Justice Report, it mainly says that 40% of people live outside the protection of law in the world. So these people, they are unhappy ultimately, and more than 5 billion people, they fall into justice gap. So this is one of the huge gap that we can see. And there are estimated like 3.5 crore pending cases that are seen in our country. They are not merely a number, as all those connected with these cases, they are in state of anxiety. So these 3.5 crore pending cases are seen, so they will be like they don't know like whether they are going to clear their cases, whether they will get punishment or not. So they are in anxiety daily. So these group of people, they are also in unhappy state. And India rule of law rank, which mainly says that 69 as per World Justice Report in 2021. So it is having some chilling effect on right to life, right to liberty, economic justice, dignity and national integration. So these are some important data which mainly says that in India we can see at most unhappiness. So if you're talking about one more important dimension here, so in happier societies we can see there will be the lower crime rates. That means happiness, it is inversely proportional to the crime rates. So happiness is high means crime rates will be low. Happiness is low means crime rate will be high. So if you see in India, if you're talking about the National Crimes Record Bureau report, so there is increasing of crimes that is seen. Even I think 10 days back we see about this NCRB report, and there is increasing of number of rapes, number of dowry, domestic violence cases that are seen. So in India we can also say that there is high rate of crime that is seen. That means there is low level of happiness, right? So the data suggests that happy countries, they have lower crime rates. So they are inversely proportional. For example, if you see Finland, Denmark, Philippines, South Africa, India and Sri Lanka, at least one of the 4 crime variables, they share an inverse relation. So in these countries we can see there is a high level of violence or high level of crime rate. So countries which are scoring high on rule of law index, they score well on index of happiness. So you have to remember this. So if you're talking about index of happiness, it is mainly regarding this rule of law index. So if you see some countries like United Arab Emirates, UAE was the first country in the world to set up a separate ministry for happiness. So first country to come up with a Ministry of Happiness is UAE, United Arab Emirates. and this ministry mainly monitors impact of policies through happiness meter. So what is the impact of policy, whether they are coming up with the right policy, whether it is leading to happiness of people or whether it is leading to sorrow of people. So this ministry mainly monitors that will finally ensure the better life of citizens of that country. And next one is, even Bhutan introduced gross national happiness. It is a measure of good governance, right? So these are two important countries that you need to remember. And next one is, finally author says that, so whenever we are having this, whenever we are mainly focusing on happiness measure, so that will lead a greater number of people reposing trust in their government. So whenever we are ensuring happiness of people firstly, then that will help to increasing of trust of people on government. It is one of the important for happiness in the country. So this is gist of this topic, and I like this article the most. And now let us try to see next topic. Before seeing this topic, I want to make a small announcement on this platform. If you want to clear UPSC 2022, we came up with one excellent, highly beneficial as well as highly economical course, that is current affairs package along with mains answer writing practice. So how this course will be useful? So one thing I want to say here is, before entering into examination hall, you need to know at least 1.5 years current affairs, and this is right time to join this course to cover current affairs from January 2021 onwards. And here in this course we are mainly focusing on this mains answer writing practice. As you all know, after once prelims is done, you will be having just 3 months of time. So in these 3 months of time, you can't efficiently focus on writing essays, case studies, and as well as your answers. So here in this course, we are mainly focusing on this mains answer writing practice. Here in this course, you are going to write more than 300 questions and more than 50 essays. So in this way, this course will give you enough practice to improve your answer writing skills. And one more thing is, after you join your course, this course, we are going to conduct prelims test on every Sunday, and this course which is designed as per demand of UPSC. So finally, I want to say one thing, please don't take this course as a choice. Try to join this course as soon as possible and achieve your dream of clearing UPSC. Details of this course is given in description box, so please visit that once. And if you talk to me directly regarding this course, you can call to this number 8074765513. 8074765513. And one more thing is, this course is going to be end. Registrations will be closed by October 1st week. So if you want to join, please do it fast. Please hurry up. And now let's come back and let us see last topic of the day. It is about how to grease the wheels of justice. So it is mainly talking about pendency of cases. Actually, now and then there is articles. There are a number of articles we discussed regarding this pendency of cases. And now why did I choose this article? Because there are 3 important measures which are mainly given to decrease this pendency. So now let us try to focus on those 3 points itself. So first of all, this article is important from our polity point of view, especially from GS paper 2. This will be important from your mains. You can't expect questions from here from your prelims. This will be important from your mains. So if you're talking about pendency of cases, more than 40% of cases, they are decided after 3 years in India. So you can understand how much delay there is seen in justice. Justice delayed is justice denied, right? So here more than 40% of cases, they are decided after 3 years in India. So while in many other countries which are less than 1% of cases, they are decided after 3 years. And this data mainly shows that about 70% of prisoners in India, they are under trials. So please imagine what are the problem they are facing by the under trials. Whether there is nothing that is proved, like so and so person, they did the crime, they did this, that thing. But even though that is not accused, that is not proved, also they are mainly undergoing some punishment in the jails. So this is the one tragedy that we can say. So the nation needs about 70,000 judges as claimed by former Chief Justice of India, that is T.S. Thakur, nor does it need to double the present number of judges. So present number of judges needed to be double, or we need about 70,000 of judges mainly to decrease the pendency of cases. And we also need to add about 20% of judges. This is in line with the sanction strength. And if you're talking about measures, there are 3 important measures. First one is we need to use a technology. So we need to use computer algorithms. So these computer algorithms, they need to decide on cases listing, cases allocation, and even adjournment. Okay, so first thing is we need to use this computer algorithms, and next one is here we need to use technology, especially for e-filing of cases. So e-filing of cases, that will be reduces the time, and even that will also reduces the litigants to go to courts and as well as to file their cases, and there is no need of using paper actually. And we can go for virtual hearings. So this is the third one. So due to this COVID-19 pandemic, so many cases they went for virtual hearings. So if virtual hearings is not possible in so and so cases, we can go for hybrid thing. So that is offline and plus virtual hearing. So these are the three measures which are mainly set in this topic. So this is the gist of this topic. So I hope it is clear. So by this we are concluding today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like, share and comment my videos. And don't forget to enroll to this current affairs package. Thank you so much.